Hey folks, you ever just want to do some spring cleaning in your house? You know, you got some clutter over here, or maybe this door over here needs a bit of painting and, you know, stuff's flaking off, or, you know, you've just got clutter or just layers of paint or, you know, dirt and grime or whatever you got to clean off and get out. Well, we all do. That's part of life, especially owning a home. And steam locomotives in preservation are no different. Hi, this is Trevor from History on the Move, and in this episode of Restoration Review, we're going to be circling back to 5300, the President of Washington that you see behind me of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, and learning a little bit more about where we are in the process. Now, previous episode, we kind of left off with the B&O Railroad number 3316, the Washington Tavern Lounge observation car. And I highly encourage you to come to the museum and see it for yourself, but I had a chance to catch up with Jamie Partridge, the project manager, as well as George Harwood, the master metalsmith in the restoration department here at the museum. And I've got some really good updates and some fun stuff along the way. So sit back, relax, grab that favorite cup of coffee, tea, juice, whatever the heck you're drinking these days, and enjoy this restoration review. All right, so I got you on the ground with me here in the paint booth. So let's go over some things. So remember, the last time we did Restoration Review, the last big project to get out of here was the Tavern Lounge observation car number 3316. So now all, or most of the concerted efforts here are into 5300, better known as the President of Washington. And we have something like this that is sat out in the elements. And you can see, you know, and then for those of you that have visited the museum over time, or perhaps you've seen photos of it, from when it first was on display in the 60s till now. You know, anything that sits out in the elements is bound to begin to break down if it's not cared for, or, you know, just even if you do care for it, just over time, the sun, the rain, the sleet, the hail, the storm, everything just begins to just break this stuff down. Just the way these things go. Mother Nature trying to reclaim it, I believe. But, so to kind of combat that a little bit, there's a lot of rust that builds up and corrosion and things like that. And a really good product for that is, let me spin you around, let me show you this. This is what Jamie uses right here. This is called Marhide. This is a one-step rust converter. And it's a water-based latex formula that pretty much just stops the oxidation or the rust process and creates almost like a gel coat barrier that kind of inhibits any future rust. So it kind of locks in whatever is already there. You know, so it kind of, it does its job, it dissipates, it breaks down the rust that's there, and then it creates this gel coat, and then it creates a protective layer, so that way nothing else can you know, build upon that. And so it goes on, and then it basically converts itself through the magic of chemistry to black color. And you can see that in a couple of different places, and I'll show that to you as we keep moving. I'll point it out. So that way, when you do apply this stuff, you know where it has been taken and where it has not. So maybe you put it on a particular spot and you see like a bare spot and you go, oh, I missed, I have to come back, that kind of stuff. So if you look at this, the whole, let's go to the front of this thing. So all of this is, let's go to the front, 5300 here. So if you look, here's a good example of that. The entire front of this. Now, this is primer, but there is also, this was also done with the Marhide. And again, because rust and all that good stuff builds up. Now, something else I do want to point out is, again, so this is primered right here. All this is primered. And back up far enough, and actually, we'll get up on the scaffolding here in a minute. You can see the stack. The smokestack is also. So I don't see them right in view, but the jacketing bands, right? So the joint bands that, actually, let's go and see if we can, let's go around the other side here. Aha, perfect. All right, so what are we looking at? Well, give me a second here. Got some good notes from Jamie there. So what holds all this in, because there's no way you could have an entire continuous piece of metal, sheet metal, that would act as your jacketing. And we'll get into jacketing in a minute, but you need to have sections of it as you go along. And then you have what they're called bands. And these bands are what basically create tension on there and help to kind of keep those together as well as tie them down so that way you don't have moisture and water and all that other good stuff getting in there. So why don't we get up on there and get a closer look. All right, so before we get into jacketing, we've got a whole thing about jacketing. Let's talk about, so let's get a nice up close view here. Let's bring you down. So this is the marhide, and this is what it does. Essentially, if there was rust on here, which most likely there was, and this was needle scaled and pressure washed, as I told you, this is now bare metal, and then you put the marhide on. If there's any form of corrosion inside of here, it begins to break that down, create a barrier in that gel coat, and then locks it in. And like I said, when you see the black, it turns black. And let's go up top here. Here's another example of that. See all this? This is very deep pitting, as you can see. And this is some pretty hardcore stuff. But once you put the marhide on, it locks all that in, and now you have yourself a sealed surface, if you will. So jacketing, right? Let's talk about this for a minute. So what is jacketing? Well, that's a good question. Let's answer that. So the steam locomotive, in and of itself, is a heat engine, right? It creates heat, and it uses that heat to then boil water, to then turn into steam, to then push a piston back and forth to do work. Now, you need to be able to contain that heat, because if the heat just went out to atmosphere, that's very thermally inefficient. That heat is now just venting out, and you're not containing it inside of the pressure vessel, which is what the boiler is. So what they did was, and there is a separate video that's coming from my channel, History on the Move here, about the history of insulation on steam locomotives. That's coming, but we'll just use the word insulation for now. Now, over time, eventually they put forms of insulation on here, and you would have an insulation that was against the pressure vessel, right? The riveted boiler itself, in which the heat is being made and the steam is being generated. But you can't just lay the insulation over there, because what would happen? Well, you're chucking down the tracks at 60, 70, 80 miles an hour. That jacketing's just gonna blow off everywhere. So what do? Well, you put jacketing over it, and that's where this comes from. And the jacketing essentially forms a shell over it. So not only does it keep it against the pressure vessel itself, but it also allows the elements, snow, sleet, hail, rain, the sunlight from beating on that, okay? Now, here's a fun fact. You yourself are a heat engine, right? We create heat. And if you want to think of it this way, your subcutaneous fat, all right, this stuff you can pull, all right, this stuff right here, that is your form of insulation. And when it rains outside or it's cold outside and you put a jacket on, that's your jacketing. So think of it that way, okay? That's hopefully that helps to convey it, right? So next time you go out and you're walking around with your jacket on or whatever, say, oh, I'm kind of like a steam engine. So let's get back to talking a little bit more about why 5300 looks in this particular way, and you'll see what I'm saying in a minute. All right, so as you can hopefully see, if I push down right here, there's the rivets inside of the pressure vessel itself, right here. And you got another one right here. Now you can't really see that one, but anyway, a big old rivet right here. This is the pressure vessel beneath the jacketing. So you would have a layer of insulation, essentially where my hand is, and then this jacketing here helps to keep all that in place and keeps the elements off of it. And so in preservation, they typically try to keep jacketing in place to keep that insulation in place. Or if it has the magnesium carbonate / asbestos in it, then that gets abated, and then the jacketing is then put back on. And let's see if we can find a good example here. Actually, let's move over here. We can see it here. They actually just use wood. Let me see. Here we go. Let's get a light on for you. So you can see right here, they just use wood to take up the space of where the insulation pressure vessel would go. And then this just gets, kind of seats over that and follows the contour. So that is jacketing 101. Now, this was definitely power washed. This was pressure washed, and this is how you get down to this wonderful smooth finish. And the boiler jacketing bands that go here, those are also being marhided, for lack of a better term, and then they will get painted and then they will be reapplied here. Pretty neat to look at though, and then there's these little, look like clamps at the top, and that's what kind of ties all these together. If you go back and look at the video, the restoration review that we did for AFT1, American Freedom Trade, or Reading 2101, whatever the heck you want to call it. I believe if we got up close enough in there, you can see those little clamps on there. Pretty sure I got up on the running boards and pointed that out, or you at least see it in the footage. So you should definitely check that out if you're curious about how jacketing sits. So remember how we talked about that pressure washing that Jamie's been doing, trying to get the dirt, the grease, the grime off of 5300? Well, this will put it'll put your hot water heater at your house to shame, and whatever other pressure washers you got in your house. You talk about blasting some stuff, this bad boy will do that for you. This is an Alcoa cleaning systems, oil fired, runs off of 480 volts AC, hot water pressure washing system. And it runs at 7,000 PSI. I mean, let's be real. The stuff you have in your house isn't gonna even get close to this. This is heavy duty. So you have a couple things here. Why don't we get the GoPro and I can show you some of the little nuances of this thing. Let's do that. All right, so as we said, this sucker puts out pressurized water at 7,000 PSI and hot too. That burner in there is flipping hot. So what you got here is you got a main tank. Here's your manifold that comes off, comes down, and it splits. So you have one that goes to as the tag indicates, the paint booth lead. So you follow this down, it then goes up, over, and there's the paint booth. So that's that. Now you have your other one. This is in the closed position. And this is just for if you want something right here. So say if you're working in bay 3 over here, or bay 2 over here, you can use it directly in the shop itself. And again, so I said this is oil fired, and we know that because here's your fuel tank. And let's see here, let's get you some light. There's your fuel tank, and your level, there's your sight glass, is about right here. So, and there's your fuel filter. Here's your unit, the burner unit itself. This is Suntech. So this is very akin to what would be if you had an oil burning furnace in your house, forced air, of course. Very similar. Beckett is the brand that I know and have tinkered with. So you have your fuel, comes down, goes in, you have a burner inside. Your igniter is also inside of here, and here's your reset button and all this good stuff. So the heat then goes up here, and then turn this light off into your tank. Your water is here, and it gets hot, 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 hot. And then your exhaust goes out and vents to atmosphere. And then you've got this massive 480 volt AC pump. I mean, this thing is a beast. And so all of that here, this is what gets that water moving, if you will. And here is your control panel. So like I said, Jamie Partridge, our project manager, spec'd this out himself, put it all together himself. This is just utterly amazing. It's something that we needed for a very long time. And it filled the void that we had in terms of being able to get dirt and grease and grime and paint and blah, 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 blah off of some of the rolling stock and locomotives. All right, so we've moved down a little bit here on 5300. So here is her smokestack, and we pointed this out in one of the previous restoration review videos that George Harwood, as always, does a phenomenal job. You can see some of his work here, if you can even see that, and that's a good thing that you can't see it. He blended this all in. He put all kinds of welds and fills and just stuff, because this stack looked pretty ragged. But Jamie went through and again, put the primer on this as well. And let's move, we can look at the front over here. And so the front, again, so these were, the last time I think I looked at it, the dogs were not on the smoke box. What's a dog? Well, in this case, you can kind of see it sits against the smoke box itself, and then the smoke box door here creates like a little, here, here's a better view. It essentially, as you tighten down the bolt, it pulls it through the thread against the smoke box door and essentially locks it in. And if you look, also the Capitol Dome emblem, very synonymous with the B&O Railroad, has also been primed as well, as has the entire smoke box. And if we come up, oh, what are we missing? Yeah, let's go talk about that. Well, what we were looking for was the headlight. This gives us a good chance to talk about just a quick and dirty history as to how headlights on locomotives came about. Well, the very primitive ones, well, they didn't have any. And eventually they got to where they would burn wood on a car placed in front of the locomotive. And then eventually, you know, they would just start burning things. And sometime prior to the Civil War, the date is not running off the top of my head at the moment, but kerosene and or whale oil began to become very prominent. And you really get this up until you get to the Gilded Age, and where, right, this is the Gilded Age is technically in American history, the end of 1870s to 1880, 1890, and into what starts the progressive era of the early 1900s. But this is where we begin to get the turn of the century battle for electricity, right? We have Tesla, and Edison, Westinghouse, all these names are coming out of the woodworks. But there's one name in the railroad that becomes synonymous with headlights. And who is that? Well, Pyle National Company. Started in 1899, they are who built most of the guts for this guy. When it was running off of 32 volts DC generated by the dynamo that would be on top of the 5300s pressure vessel. And so this is neat though, because this is how we get to these headlights that are, and marker lights as well, and running lights and all this business that are powered by electricity. You know, burning fuels of any sort are gone by the beginning of the 1900s. So Pyle National Company really kind of cornered the market on that, much like Industrial Brown Hoist did with steam wreck cranes / derricks. You know, pretty much akin to the same thing. Why don't we get up close though with this and take a little bit more as to what, have a little look see at what Jamie's doing with it. All right, so much like you need to be able to see in life, well, one, to see where you're going, that's always a good thing, know where you're going, and also know where you've been. So here, though, you can really see, let's see, get the light on in this thing. This has been pretty corroded over time. Obviously, water has gotten in here. And that's not out of the realm of possibility, but this is what we're dealing with. So I don't know off the top of my head if George is going to make a new one of these, or it might just be left as is. Can't deny or confirm, don't know. So let's keep moving here, though. You got some other neat stuff here. So they've taken off the number boards here, and though the other pieces are over here. So this has all been pretty much laid out, and you know the glass pieces are here. Obviously, you can see how weather beaten. I mean, that's yellow. I mean, there's no doubt about that. That is pretty bad. Again, just some sun beating on it over time. I actually had an old pair of glasses that look like that. That's when you know you got to go to the eye doctor, get yourself a new prescription. Don't be lazy. So these are what, again, come out of the side, so that way you can see what number it is. And all that gets illuminated inside with the bulb here. And also, we can see some good evidence. Let's see if I can get up close with you. Actually, you know what? You can see it right here. Move back to the front. You can see where Jamie has taken this over to our sandblasting cabinet and use this fine stuff right here to get in there and blast it, right? This is it's very akin to what they did with AFT1 when Ref Services came out and they did the sand blasting, the media blasting on AFT1. So pretty much the same consistency, same stuff there. Very fine. You can see evidence of it over here too. And eventually all that will get cleaned out, and then this will get a beautiful new coat of paint as well. And here's the front of this. So these kind of all work together. The glass sits inside. You got a little rim here. You got little clasps that come over, lock all that in. So there's definitely a lot going on here that Jamie needs to you know, get together here. Now, something to keep in mind is because this dynamo no longer functions on this thing and 5300 doesn't run anymore as a steam locomotive, it sits, is a monument to the president class of the P7s that, were huge during the time of Daniel Willard. This, like everything else in the roundhouse and other places, will run off of 120 volts AC. So the light you see in this and other locomotives in the roundhouse are all 120 volt AC. So why don't we go back to the, you can see the, this George Harwood is just, the words escape me as to what just a beautiful creationist he is. I mean, he breathed life into metal, and this is what you get. He's pretty much the Jesus of metalworking. I'll say it. Let's go back to the paint booth and have a look-see at some more things in there. Okay, so we're back in the paint shop here, the paint booth. So for those of you who have taken the restoration shop tour, and I highly encourage that you do, at points in the future, you can see where George painted and installed these. And again, this will act as the insulation, if you will, the insulation, against the pressure vessel, and then the jacketing gets laid on there. So the boiler jacketing, though, as you can see, is not here for the belly. That has already been taken off and was cut. It was painted, it was primed, all that good stuff, and pretty much is ready to go, but we want to get kind of started. Everything above it and just above it will, once that gets its coat of paint, et cetera, it gets to a good spot where they can put that in. That is when the belly jacketing will go back on. No point in putting it on now, and then it gets dirty and blah, 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 blah. So speaking of paint, why don't we walk over to a table, and I got a bit of a treat for you. All right, so hopefully this shows up in the light, but this is the final color. So for those of you out in YouTube land and rail fans and history lovers out there, are going, oh, is it going to be the blue or the green paint scheme? Yes, it's going to be the OG 1927 Pullman green / olive green that it came with. And yes, they are going to do the gold bands and maroon bands that went all over this thing and really made it pop. So I think it's just absolutely beautiful. You have to see this in person. Maybe this is the best angle. But yeah, this is going to be an absolute beautiful, beautiful restoration when Jamie and George are done with this. Again, top-notch quality craftsmanship. Doesn't get any better than this. Let me make a quick correction there. So the belly jacketing will be put on as soon as everything below the running boards here, above me, is painted. Okay? Just want to put that in there. Everything below the running boards. Once it's painted, then that belly jacketing that has already been primed and painted will be installed. All right, so I'm in the cab of 5300. And so a couple things I want to point out here is Jamie also did a ton of degreasing and subsequent hot pressure washing to get just clumps of grease and dirt and grime and other nastiness that were in this cab. So let's see, let's turn on, hopefully that shows up. I shouldn't need any lights. Let's try it. There we go. Oh, that's nice. Okay, so yeah, you could see even in the nooks and the crannies around here, Jamie really got in and did his work here. And not sure, but this is, if it's not period correct, tongue and groove boards that went here, they're at least tongue and groove boards, and that's what 5300 would have had here going around the window frame. And it's hard to know if there was, again, tongue and groove elsewhere. I don't see, and Jamie hasn't seen it either when I talked to him. He hasn't seen any evidence that it's up against here, but I have seen plenty of steam engines that do have it here, so hard to say, hard to say. But yeah, so all this was also just gone through and cleaned really good. And the sad thing is, and this is something that again comes with age of these things and preservation, and who had it before, what did they do, yada yada yada, is, and even the railroad itself was synonymous with sometimes removing stuff, so that's why you see 5300, it's kind of picked over, right? Like, you're missing knobs, like one of these should be here. The stoker controls are gone. So yeah, the cab is a bit of a shell. I mean, you have the main, a lot of the main things are here. Your throttle and your hydrostatic lubricator, and let's see here, well, yeah, that's about it. Your controls for the turret are also here, and what I believe is either a primitive CTC or a speedometer. I can't swear to either one of those. But yeah, I mean, even the power reverse is gone out of here. But yeah, so the seats will eventually be redone. Those will get put in, and the sheer amount of work that that is going to go into this is just utterly amazing. So, next time you take that shop tour, make sure you tell Jamie and George that you appreciate their efforts, because I can tell you for a fact, working alongside of them and, in the same shop as them, those guys work their butts off. All right, so from the outside here, one more note before we close this one out is, so Jamie also worked from the rear of the cab forward when he did all of his degreasing and hot pressure washing here. And you can see, unless you were to media blast this or sandblast it, it's gonna be really hard to get down to bare metal. But most of this will probably get a really good sanding, I would anticipate. And then, go into the priming and the painting stages. But, this is just amazing stuff. I'm always privileged to be able to come in here and look at this stuff. Remember we talked about the Marhide. Here it is again. You can see how they covered it over. And this stuff, if you were to take a tour of the shop, maybe, I don't know, 7-8 months ago, the stuff was, had some surface rust on it. So they were able to put the Marhide on there, and that does the voodoo that it do. Same thing here with this reservoir. So yeah, pretty neat stuff. I gotta say, we covered a good bit of ground in a short bit of time. We also got to learn how you yourself are a heat engine, and how you insulate yourself, and what your jacketing looks like. And we also learned that, there's plenty of ways to get this thing back to, its fit and form, and making it look like it's 1927 all over again. Now, this is a labor of love for the people that are involved with this. We have to keep that in mind. And so, when people come out and they see this thing, you have to keep in mind that, it takes many hands and many hours. The hours that are put into this, I've looked at Jamie and George's logbooks before. It is ridiculous in a good way, the amount of hours that go in. So any restoration project that you go to, anywhere in the United States, and overseas for that matter, has so many hours, and the love for these machines and other rolling stock and buildings and stations, it's kind of unmeasurable. There's no way to put your finger on that, and there's no equation to figure out, how much dedication and love goes into this. You just have to look at the final product and say, you know what, that looks pretty darn good, and I gave it 102%. So this is Trevor from History on the Move. I hope you learned some more about 5300, the President of Washington. And stay tuned, because we have more restoration reviews coming up. And be sure to check out the other stuff on the channel. We cover not only here in Baltimore, but Virginia. We go elsewhere, hence the channel's name, History on the Move. So as I always say, get out there. I want you to read history, explore history, but most importantly, I want you to make your own history. I'll see you on the next one.